Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
We are most pleased to welcome you to our 29th year of the North Idaho College Public Forum. With today's program, we are commencing our 29th year on PBS. It's really been a pleasure over the years, and we are so delighted to be doing it again another year with you. We particularly want to thank the University of Idaho Center for Business Development and Research for making our guest available to us today while he's been addressing their third annual conference dealing with livable communities. Our topic today is the new economic base of our communities. We're so honored to have as our guest to kick off the 29th year, Dr. Thomas M. Power. He is an author of one of his books is called Lost Landscapes and Failed Economics, The Search for a Value of Place. He is the author of other books and articles. Our guest is a professor and also the chair of the Department of Economics at the University of Montana. He is also a regular commentator on the Montana Public Radio. In addition to that, our guest was a Woodrow Wilson National Fellow at Princeton University, where he received a master's and doctorate in economics. Dr. Power, I've heard about your work so much from my friends and others, and it's such a wonderful way to kick off our new year, and you're very gracious to be with us, and we thank you very much.
I'm pleased to be here.
And as always, I'm pleased to have our two regular panelists, and I'm so pleased you could be here today to kick off the new year. First of all is Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Vice President of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and we shall invite Janelle to commence today's questions with Dr. Power.
Dr. Power, welcome to our program. Our communities are very important to us, and of course quality of life in our communities is very important to us. The question that I have for you is, what are the economic trends that lead to a better quality of life? What do we see really happening with our communities right now? Maybe they're not leading to a better quality of life, but they're trends nonetheless. What are the economic trends?
Well, I think the economic trends unfortunately divide in the sense that some areas, especially in North Idaho and down in the Boise area, have, in the jargon of some folks anyways, taken off. There seems to be an ongoing cycle of growth that feeds on itself, bringing more and more people, more and more businesses, more and more economic activity. On the other hand, there are areas of the state, just upstream, for instance, from Coeur d'Alene in the Kellogg area, as well as down in the more agricultural southeastern corner of the state, where communities are struggling to simply hang on to the people they have because the agricultural base doesn't support the size of population that existed there until now. And we have communities in between. I think in the north central part of the state, areas that previously were dependent upon wood products, there's fear that they're going to decline. They haven't so far, and I don't expect them to, but there's a good deal of tension there because they think they're on the verge of sliding down a very slippery economic slope. So we have some areas that are struggling to redefine themselves economically, and others who probably wish that the pace of growth and change would slow down so that public policy could get at least some minimal handle on it.
Steve Schenck. Dr. Powers, you mentioned growth as one of the factors in growth. It feeds on itself, I think, is the term you used. Are there other factors driving growth in communities like Boise and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, other places in the Intermountain West that are experiencing rapid economic growth?
Well, my analysis has focused on the anomaly of these areas experiencing very rapid economic growth exactly at the same time that their traditional natural resource bases have been in relative or even absolute decline when it comes to, for instance, the mining industry in the Silver Valley, or even wood products that depends on national forests in north central Idaho. Despite the decline in the traditional economic base, these areas have been leading the nation by often a factor of 2, 3, or 4 in terms of the expansion of the economy. And that obviously raises a question to an economist: what's going on here? And it's clear, I think, to most people, but not most policymakers, strangely enough, that a significant part of that new economic vitality that led, I think it was Time Magazine, it may have been Newsweek, to run a cover story in the mid-'90s about the resettlement of the inland West. It's clear that it's people pursuing what they perceive to be higher quality living environments, and that includes social environment, less congestion, less crime. It includes the natural environment, cleaner air, cleaner water, outdoor recreational opportunities, what they perceive to be better schools or a better chance to influence local public policy. It's a whole mix of different qualities associated with the communities in the Mountain West that has triggered this shift of both people and economic activity. And that's what I've labeled the new economic base. We aren't exporting silver or necessarily potatoes or forest products. I mean, one cannot explain what's happened in Idaho in those traditional terms. One has to turn to the decisions that people are making and businesses are making about wanting to locate here in Idaho and in the rest of the Mountain West, or one can't explain what's going on at all.
You mentioned the irony of Mountain West economies growing at a time when their traditional resource-based industries are in decline. Is there a hidden irony in that growth, in that it's possible that growth itself may be the single limiting factor on growth, as we grow away from the small populations and the ready access to the outdoors and unspoiled environment? Are we moving closer and closer to a time that the thing that has attracted people here will no longer be here?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the threat. There's no self-limiting set of forces except a negative set of forces, and that's as the population and population density grows, and the congestion and the urban maladies that are associated with the larger metro areas that people have been fleeing, as those are imported into the area, that ultimately is what will limit that ongoing expansion. But at that point, people won't be any better off, the landscape won't be better off, we will have lost something that's unique and valuable and important to people, which is why I think we need to stop spending most of our time worrying about the economic base of the past. Think of all the effort that goes into concerns with wood products or mining or agriculture, and how little concern really in terms of effective policy goes into trying to protect the quality of life in our urban areas as they expand. We need to refocus some of that public policy energy and effort, or we're going to face the problem that you've outlined there.
Thank you.
With your comments, you built the bridge for my question, and that is that as we do grow in certain segments of Idaho and Montana and all the what I call the Rocky Mountain region, we have the rural areas that obviously aren't growing. We have the cities that are. For focusing for a moment on those that have the great growth rate, is there a conflict between the residents who've been there a long time and have, as you've indicated, a traditional economic base, and new residents with another economic interest and base? So I have a two-part question. One is, do you see there a conflict? And number two, what kind of policies would you suggest, if there is that disagreement on policy, to bring people together in some inclusive way of deciding the future for that community?
Well, one of the interesting things, because this growth is built around people making residential decisions for themselves and their families and their businesses, there's a self-selection process going on. And maybe not surprising, although it surprised me as an economist, but maybe from a sociological point of view it's not surprising. The self-selection process has largely led to people with quite similar views politically, size of family, broad range of similarities. The newcomers are in many ways very similar to existing residents. And that's not surprising. People don't want to be strangers in their homes, and so they're looking for places they think they'll feel comfortable in. There are two aspects, though, where I think there's real conflict. One is, and it's not related to the growth, it's related to the fact that the older economic base is in decline. That requires people whose livelihoods have depended upon that to make adjustments, sometimes quite painful adjustments. So one can expect insecurity, uncertainty, anger there. The thing that dramatizes that and in some ways makes it worse is that a small part of the new people coming in affect a lifestyle in terms of size of home, type of car driven, expenditure patterns.
Even the price of real estate and all those things.
Yeah, that doesn't fit. I mean, the trophy home is used often as the example. That doesn't fit. In the West, in the past, it was hard to tell, even in a lot of our cities, especially our smaller cities, where the high-income neighborhoods were and where the low-income neighborhoods were. I worked with public utilities who were trying to weatherize low-income homes, and that was always a puzzle for them. They couldn't, in a large city, you just go to the poor neighborhood. You could go door to door, and that would be an effective way to find poor people or low-income people. In Montana's cities, you couldn't do that because people were much more mixed, and they didn't stand out. You couldn't look at them and tell whether they had a lot more money. There's a implicit cultural conflict between the new have-nots associated with the decline in the old economy and the new haves who aren't shy in flaunting their wealth. So I think that represents a problem that we have to spend some time focused on.
One other part to my question then it would be that in a community that is in that category now, what kind of suggestions, since your expertise is economics, that those who make policies should consider to try to address that problem that you've identified?
Well, I think the most important part of it, I don't think you can do anything to teach people good manners about flaunting wealth. I think in the end that's offensive enough to people that the community will handle that side of the problem. I think it is important to try and smooth the transition for people who've spent their lives in economic sectors that are now in decline. There's two different ways to do that. One is far less productive than the other. One is to try and use government policy to keep things the way they used to be. That's, tries to freeze the economy where it used to be, tries to freeze patterns of economic activity where it used to be, try to protect mining, keep mining going, trying to protect the same level of timber harvest that always had taken place. Government policy in that direction almost always fails because you can't, by fiat, bring back an economy that has changed. The far more productive thing is to ease the transition. I'd like to emphasize the fact that most of the workers in these industries are making very productive adaptations on their own. The skilled, highly paid workers in mining and in wood products weren't being paid good money for nothing. They were skilled, energetic, disciplined workers who, in the new economy, have found that they're able to make the transitions. And I've been studying using unemployment compensation records to follow individual workers. And for instance, wood products workers and people from mining industries largely operate heavy equipment. That's what they primarily do. And they have made the transition into construction and other manufacturing at very, very modest loss of pay. They continue to collect the premium pay, almost the full level of premium pay that they previously were able to obtain in wood products and mining, as they shift to other skilled activities that require the use of complex, very expensive equipment too. And so that the transitions that workers have been engineering for themselves in these growing economies. The growing economy assures a broad range of activities, construction activity being one of them, in which these blue-collar workers have been able to successfully plug in. Where that's not taking place, because communities aren't growing, I think the role of public policy is to help people obtain the skills, the knowledge, to make that transition. It's a valuable workforce that our economy needs, increasingly is going to need, and the focus should be on helping them make that transition.
Thank you, Jen Elbert.
Dr. Power, you're a professor at a university, and so you're very interested in the futures of young people. Is there a future for young people in our smaller communities, and where can they go? Much has been said about the fact that young people can't find their opportunities in small communities, and so they are gravitating or migrating to certain areas. The Boise area, of course, being one of them, but also Seattle or Portland, other larger metropolitan areas. What is happening with young people?
Well, as a parent of a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, I'm very concerned about that issue. I also take some exception to the usual depiction that our young people are being forced away from their home. We've been talking about not being able to keep the young people down on the farm for 2 centuries, or at least a century and a half. Young people migrate. Young people move. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I live in Montana. My brother lives in Denver. My sister in Los Angeles. I have 2 siblings still in Milwaukee. But we're mobile, especially when we're young. We're mobile. We shouldn't blame that mobility on lack of economic opportunity. It's young people. Even if we aren't pushing them out of the nest, they want to leave the nest and check out what else is going on in the world. So for instance, in the analysis of Montana, we give up our young people to the rest of the nation, to the rest of the West. But we get back other people's young people, other areas' young people. There's no net loss of young people. We're trading our young people for some other area's young people. And even more interesting is that our young people, when they're older, come back. That a substantial part of our in-migration is return migration. So I think our young people are doing what young people ought to do. They're going out to see what else is going on in the rest of the world. They're trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. They're forming families, and then they're making decisions about where they want to live. As they make those decisions, home starts looking good again, and we'll see them again.
Do you have to give up a lot, though, to come back?
Yes, you do. But this is the economist in me unavoidably coming out. You have to give up anything. You have to give up something for anything that's important to you. Buying a house, buying a car. If you could collect Los Angeles level salaries living in north central Idaho, you clearly would be a lot better off than people living in Los Angeles. You would have the money, but you would have the small town, lack of congestion, lack of crime, lack of pollution. You would have your cake and be eating it too. And the economy doesn't allow that. You can't, in a market economy with a mobile workforce, you can't get both big city wages and small town lifestyle. Markets won't let you do it. You're going to have to make a choice. If you want big bucks, then you take the lifestyle that's associated with big cities. If you want small town or rural lifestyle, it's not that you should give up a livelihood, but you're going to give up something in the pursuit of that. And we shouldn't wring our hands over it when people voluntarily make that choice.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Power, earlier in the show you mentioned the divide between communities that are growing rapidly, those that aren't. Typically, in changing economic times, there's a divide between people and businesses as well, a shakeout. Some businesses are going to fall by the wayside. There's new opportunity opening up for different kinds of businesses. Same with people, and I think one of the things that economists, shouldn't speak for you, but certainly in the popular press, one of the things being talked about is a widening gulf between the haves and the have-nots in terms of people in our communities. What do you see happening in those two areas, businesses and individuals?
Well, I think that's, let me deal with businesses. We really shouldn't be worried about business failures. My research indicates that the rate of business failure is the same in about the same in rapidly growing communities as well as communities that are shrinking. In a market economy, businesses fail. That's how the less efficient people who didn't make quite the appropriate decisions, that's how things shake out. That's how we adjust and change over time. What's different is in more rapidly growing communities, you have more business startups, successful business startups. So that's where the economic vitality comes. That's where the problem is when a community doesn't have those new business startups. For individuals, I think that is the primary problem with the new economy. And by new economy, in this case, I don't just mean Idaho or the Mountain West, the new economy nationwide. The floor has been pulled out from under younger, less experienced, less well-educated workers. My brothers could quit high school, drop out of high school, and get a unionized blue-collar job that allowed them to live more comfortably than my parents ever lived because they didn't have a family yet. They were getting paid a family wage and had no family, so they immediately bought new cars, rented apartments that were nicer than the home they grew up in. The new economy will not allow for that. The less educated, less experienced workers face shrinking, rapidly shrinking economic opportunities. At the other extreme, the opportunities for well-educated folks, especially adaptable folks, is exploding so that the salaries generated by the competition to a lot of us seem almost obscene. I mean, just given the age of the people. So there is this pulling apart. And it's been going on for some time. It's been going on since the mid-'70s, really. There's been a little narrowing in the tail end of the '90s. But the gap is substantial and very worrisome because it's not going to heal itself. Whether we're going to be willing to adopt public policy that tries to effectively narrow it or not, I don't know, but we're in some ways reproducing the inequality that came out of the late 19th century and early 20th century that ultimately, I don't want to suggest causal connections, but a dividing line where things turned around was the Great Depression and the Second World War and reindustrializing of the nation that led to much more equitable distribution of income. So that's a serious problem. The degree of inequality has grown substantially in the new economy.
Thank you.
From a futurist viewpoint, and with all your wonderful background in economics, what would you say as we look down the road 10 or 20 years, what type of community is going to be the most livable and vigorous versus a community that there's warning signs that they will have greater challenges?
I think communities that maintain their character and what's unique about them, I think that is going to be central. A lot of what people are fleeing is the congestion and homogenization that goes with one ring of suburban development and big box stores and strip malls and shopping centers after another, where you can't tell where you are. There's absolutely no sign to tell where you are. And all those areas end up with similar problems in terms of congestion, in terms of lack of social cohesion, in terms of the environmental problems they create. So I think communities that, and some of they can be dense urban areas like San Francisco, or I'm just pick that, or Manhattan. I mean, areas that clearly have maintained an identity, a cultural identity that's not attractive to all of us, but is attractive enough to make them vital centers that continue, even when they can't grow because of the limits on the land base.
But they have that characteristic.
They have those characteristics, and it assures a vitality. It assures that the place is never just sort of sliding downhill.
On that note, I have to bring the permanent conclusion. On behalf of our panel and our staff, Dr. Thomas Power, thank you. It's been extremely informative. You're a wonderful guest and most articulate, and we appreciate your dealing with livable communities from economic base.
Thanks for inviting me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest that you have enjoyed this program as much as we have. It's been most informative to have Dr. Thomas Power from the University of Montana, the chair of the Department of Economics and professor of economics, talking about livable communities and particularly the economic base of those communities. I invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we will discuss yet another issue as we enter our 29th year. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.